Warning: the following podcast contains graphic content that may be disturbing or triggering to some listeners. Discretion is advised. The papatangosierradelta podcast is available free of charge thanks to the support of Cracked Armor.
Their mission is to raise awareness for PTSD, TBI, and mental health to support those who struggle. By creating an army of warriors who represent the gear, their hope is that it will send a message to others that they are not alone.
Go to crackedarmor.com, say hi to Mark Long, read about the story, and find some research information about PTSD. And if you can, look good while supporting Cracked Armor by buying some gear.
(10-9). Did you say Papa Tango Sierra Delta? 10-4.
There's so much left to do, so many things I wanna say, and I say, don't make the change. If it rains every single day, I'll fight to blow it all away.
This is episode 35 of the Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast. My name is Larry Payton, and I have been diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress. The intros for the past few episodes have been shorter than normal. I know, that is my bad. However, I have been extremely busy with my MACP studies. Now, it's not that I'm saying that I have to be as busy as I am, because I don't really think I need to be. But I am guilty of absolutely loving it. I mean, I guess I'm just understanding myself on a completely different level. I'm understanding what changes in our brains, what changes in our bodies on a very, very different level. And it's just amazing. And for some odd reason, it brings me great comfort. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because I just now can understand it and make sense of it. And I now know that it is not me being weak, that it is not me being a person who doesn't suck it up, buttercup kind of a thing. Things changed. And this is what happened as a result of my traumatic experiences. It's quite actually, oddly enough, uplifting, but it also seems to take a big weight off my shoulders. So, obtaining this knowledge, it's just made me hungry, voracious. I just want more. And so, yeah, I'm putting in a lot of time reading a lot of things that I don't necessarily have to read, but I'm enjoying. And that's actually pretty cool. And yeah, I hope that it just helps me someday to be able to do a better job helping my brothers and sisters. You're in for a great episode today. The guest is Shaun Taylor. He's a solid guy. He brings a lot of positive energy, and I really hope that you get those vibes from hearing the episode. There's quite a few takeaways to this one, and yeah, put in the time and really listen. He has a lot to offer up on how you can work your way towards post-traumatic growth. Let's take a quick break.
This episode of the Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast is brought to you thanks to the support and financial sponsorship of Cracked Armor. Go to crackedarmor.com, read the story, buy the gear, wear it, to send a message to others who are struggling that they're not alone.
Also, check out Willow Tree Farm, care of Jason Subkowicz, another member who is struggling with PTSD and who frequently updates his Instagram to share his story. You can follow him at jason.subkowicz. That's Jason.Sierra Oscar Bravo Kilo Oscar Whiskey India Charlie Zulu.
And we are back from the break. Thank you very much for sticking around for the Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast. On this episode, I say, the one and only Shaun Taylor. but he kind of chuckles at that. He's not so fussy on that. How
I'm
are you
definitely
today,
not
Shaun?
one and only.
I don't know another Shaun Taylor, so you are the one and only to me, brother. You are the one and only to me. Listen, man, I am quite excited to have you on the podcast. You have an amazing background and current life in terms of what you're doing to help people. You're on the podcast, The Collective. You do a morning kind of live show, sort of to wake everyone up and get everyone on the right side. I have watched videos of you riding a bicycle, which embarrasses me on how I ride a bicycle. So I would really like to get into all that stuff today. Like every other episode, Shaun, I'm just going to ask you, please introduce yourself and tell us about your journey.
Sure, thanks. First of all, I'll start with thanks for having me on, pal. I
Absolutely.
appreciate it.
Yeah,
And wherever the conversation goes today, I'm sure it'll be a good one.
totally.
I'll introduce myself by saying hi, my name is Shaun Taylor, and this year I turned 60 years old. I live in the town of Roslyn, British Columbia, and I was born in England, moved to Canada when I was 10 years old with my family to a small mountain town called Grand Cache in Alberta. I think a standard issue Alberta boy hunting and fishing in the mountains kind of upbringing. Once I was finished high school, joined the military, and the rest is history, as they say. Moved through several careers, and here I am now in my, I guess, 7th career, doing podcasting of all things, which is laughable. So that's me in a nutshell. Maybe we'll dig into it in a little bit more detail, but that should get us started.
Absolutely. One of the things I know, well, one of the first people that actually introduced me to you when I first heard your name was from Satch. And he was telling me what an honor it was when he met you and what it did. So can you tell me about the time you guys met and how it is you're helping Satch on his journey to raise money for Honor House in BC?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Satch is a great dude, and I didn't know Satch at all, really, until I was flying back from Haiti with Seb Lavoie, would have been about a year and a half ago now, and landed in Vancouver. My flight was delayed due to weather, flying into Roslyn, into the Kootenays. So there I was in Richmond, and I just sent out a little IG story or post or whatever, and I said, hey y'all, I'm looking for some cheap hole in the wall mom and pop Asian food. Where do I go? And Satch jumped on pretty quickly and said, hey man, do you mind if I join you for a coffee? I said, bring it. How soon until you're here? And he said, I'll be there in 30 minutes. Well, I'll see you in 30 minutes.
Wow, that's
So
cool.
I'd never met him, and I hardly knew him, really. But we went out and had a little bubble tea, had some chow, and then hung out and talked for, I don't know, we hung out all in, maybe 2.5 hours-ish, something like that. And I didn't know really much of his story at all. And then once we started talking, I realized that, I had a really interesting background, and I thought that I saw something in him that I could maybe be helpful for. And so I just tried to be helpful in the moment, and then we stayed in touch. And I kind of committed to, listen, anytime you need any help, hit me up. Any time of the day, any day of the week, any week of the month, any month of the year. Just hit me up anytime. And so we did stay in touch quite frequently. I'd do video conversations with him, private IG chats or what have you. And, really, really stayed in touch, nearly on the daily sometimes, just to be helpful. Because at that time, Satch was struggling a little bit. And he had some general ideas of maybe what he wanted to do with his life, but I was trying to help him refine that and then put a little bit of velocity behind it and then help him shape it up for himself so that he could idealize whatever it was that he wanted to be when he grew up. And so he grew up and became what he is now. And, this year he's doing 22 marathons in 22 days through BC. And that's as part of an effort to build it out year after year until he's finally running across Canada, which I believe is still targeted for 2025.
That's what I heard too. And Shaun, there's no doubt that you assisted Satch in terms of the mental side and helping him get his game back together. The physical side as well, because I know you do a lot of work in terms of physicality. And ultimately, I do want us to get in this podcast on the road to recovery from any mental health illness, any bad memories, any operational stress issues, and how exercise is a huge key on that road to recovery. Before we get there, again, so you were also, I presume, helping Satch on the physical side besides just mental?
Yeah, I think I'll say this, and maybe I just won't speak specifically about Satch. I can generalize and state that this is what I do with everyone. I simply look at them as three layers: the physiological, the psychological, and the emotional. And I do that because of all of the athletes that I've worked with around the world, and that's just how I quickly silo things to better understand how many layers deep I have to work in each silo. And so if it's just the physiological side, Satch showed up already with good physiology in the sense of muscle structure and, resilience and all of that good stuff. But his physiology of his hormonal profiles and all of that good stuff, well, that wasn't ideal. So when you look at someone who looks in shape, it doesn't mean that they are in shape on the inside. And that's just physiology, irrespective of psychology or emotional states. So it was my job to try to figure out, what he was made of and what he could be made into. And when I say it was my job, I mean with him. It was my job to work with him to help him figure it out for himself. And so his physiology wasn't bad, but his psychology and his emotional states were probably the parts that needed the most work.
And you spoke about working with athletes all over the world. Before we start talking about athletes themselves, obviously it'd be cool to know. However, the biggest thing, Shaun, is what led you into this?
Into podcasting or into
well, no, I guess into the athleticism, the athletic performance,
right.
Because you work with, I guess what I want people to get clear here is that you are not a guy who works at Fit for Less or whatever, and you know what I mean. Like you work with elite people that are working out or training for elite events. So if you could just tell us about how did you got into that, and what are some things you do to help athletes?
That's a good question, and you're right to ask it specifically because I do tend to be underwhelming in some of my answers. I sometimes steer away from some of my, I guess, accomplishments or credentials per se. So
you're a humble man, I know that.
I try to be, but it borders on. As we just talked about on the podcast recently, it borders on the imposter syndrome aspect as well, and so I have it strong. I have the imposter syndrome.
I like that. We're getting into that today, brother, because that 100%. Right. Yeah, I think I hear that so many times from so many listeners that's the biggest thing they struggle with.
Yeah,
is an imposter syndrome.
It's a problem for sure.
It is. So let's get back to your training before we get into
it. So when I. For those who don't know, I'll push a little bit of my military career into the forefront now and just state that during my career, it was a hard-charging career with a lot of velocity, and eventually I ended up in Tier 1 JTF2, or CANSOFCOM, Special Operations. And I was a team leader, a warrant officer in JTF2. And when I left the teams, whether I was always this way or whether the military made me this way is immaterial, I suppose. But I do love an adventure. I love a challenge. I love doing hard things that I think that I can't do, and then I try to do them. And so the JTF2 or Tier 1 reinforced that notion in me that I'm capable of anything. Let me go back a little bit. When I was in high school, I was very much a skinny, underperforming kid. I weighed 135 pounds. I thought I was dumb. And my family life wasn't ideal because of a number of issues. And so, when I joined the military, I didn't have much to offer, quite frankly. And so I I learned how to move in the system. I learned how to absorb information. I learned how to pay attention to good men. And I started emulating their paths forward. I started identifying who the guys who were that did it the best, for lack of a better term. And I started pursuing excellence. And, my trajectory took me into some qualification areas where I guess I got some good qualifications in the military, some esteemed qualifications, we'll call it. And through that process, I learned to really push myself and got really comfortable with being really uncomfortable. In fact, seeking uncomfort or discomfort all the time. So when I left the teams, I was looking to almost replace the velocity of what I'd left, and I didn't know what that would look like. So I bought a mountain bike and I started riding a little bit when I was teaching at the Ontario Police College for about a year when I left the JTF2. I just kind of rode my bike around and thought, well, all right, let's just ride a bike, I suppose. And eventually that I bumped into some friends, made some friends in the civilian world, which I didn't have really when I was on the teams. There was no civilian friends. And then when I went to the Ontario Police College, my friends were police officers that had been seconded to Ontario Police College. And then when I got out of, when I left the OPC or Ontario Police College, then I was truly, I'll call it a civilian. The correct term is veteran, but I had nothing behind me really that I could talk about, and I had nothing in front of me to identify as to what I was going to do next. I had a bike, and beyond that, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. Make a long story short, I ended up becoming a computer system engineer and teaching computer system engineer programs for a while. And during that period, I was also riding my mountain bike. And because I lived in Ottawa, I'd head out to the Gatineau Hills and ride with a couple of my civilian buddies. And we just thought we were so mega awesome. We thought we could ride a bike. I remember, riding up a little molehill of a hill, and I mean tiny hill, like very underwhelming. And the crew of us that were there at the time, we were all trying to clear this little molehill, and none of us could. And I mean, day after day, we'd go back, and one day I cleared it, and everyone was like, "Yeah, I can't believe you cleared that." Well, I can look back on that now, and it's laughable, of course. But that's the thing, levels to the game. At the time, when I was with my buddies, we thought we were large and in charge. And then, many years later, that riding with my friends turned into, well, I think I'll put my name in the hat and maybe compete. And
Wow.
that first race that I ever competed in was in the Gatineaus, and I stood on the start line. Now you've got to imagine that I hadn't. It wasn't too long after I'd left JTF2 as a warrant officer, so you know that's no small thing. And so I'm standing
No.
on the start line and I'm looking at all the guys on the start line, and they're all like really skinny dudes. And I'm thinking, I'm gonna crush you boys. I'm gonna kick your asses so hard. You're not even gonna know what's happened. And so when the gun went off, that was the last time I saw them. I mean, they all punched off the start line and I never saw them again. And so I started chasing after them thinking, what is even going on? How's this even happening? Obviously, I'm going to catch him. And they just kept getting further and further ahead to the point where when I crossed the finish line, the volunteers that were at the finish line were tearing down the finish line. There was no finish line at all. There was just an old lady standing there, and she said, "Don't worry, it gets easier," as I passed her, and I thought, what is even going on? And so I couldn't believe I'd been smoked that hard. And so,
Yeah.
I shook my head and thought, wow, I'm a moron for thinking that I could kick that ass. I better get back to learning how to kick this ass and then go kick their ass. And so I started riding a lot. I started getting better at riding. And then I got my head into, well, I think I'm going to go do a 24-hour solo mountain bike race. And it seems like that's the hardest thing in cycling. So that's what I'm going to do. And so I pursued 24-hour cycling, and I've done 30 24-hour solos and competed at
What?
several world championships,
Did
and
you say
actually
30?
became, 30.
Wow.
and actually became a world champion in 2010. Sorry, 2009. And so I've
shit.
competed around the world. And through that process, we were actually living down in Texas. We'd gone down there for 2 years. My wife was working with a large engineering firm, and she'd been asked to go down there and do some work. So we went down as a family. And I was breaking into the Texas racing scene, kicking that Texas ass. And I thought, okay, this is fun. I'm in the groove. And then I was out on a shop ride, as it's called. So a large bicycle shop down in Sugarland, Texas, that was sponsoring me at the time. And we'd go out for these shop rides every Saturday morning. And, it'd range from kind of amateur competitiveness all the way through to like serious competitiveness. And there was this young family guy, and he'd always ride alongside me. His name is Shane, and he'd ask me a boatload of questions. Some of it would be about the military, some of it would be about leadership, some of it would be about bike racing, some of it would be about what should I eat, how much should I drink, what do you wear, and all of the good questions. And so then one day he said, "Hey, man, would you coach me?" And I said, let me think about that. And so I went home that day and I thought, man, like if I start this, I know what I'm like. I'm just going to go hard at it and full tilt, pour myself into it. So I had to be careful. I have to be careful with everything I do, hobbies or jobs or podcasts or whatever, because like the moment I cross the start line, I'm all in.
Yep.
And so
I'm
I
with
just
you.
have to be careful with
Yeah.
what I do. So I went home and I thought about it. And he was a young family guy, and he was such a good dude. I thought, man, I'd really like to help him. So I grabbed a pen and paper and started scribbling down some ideas. And I thought, I want to be able to provide my services to guys like this, and I want to provide them as cheap as possible, so it's really affordable for a young family dude. And all I'm going to ask from them is 100% effort. Like, give me your all. I don't want your money. I want your effort.
There you go.
And so through that process, I scribbled out a name, and I thought, well, what am I interested in? What drives me? What's important to me in my life? And it's always forward momentum. I'm really particular with anyone that I talk to or anyone that I work with on the importance of forward momentum, not backsliding, not staying static, only moving forward. And so I named the company Forward Momentum Coaching, and I ran that company for 15 years.
Wow.
And over the 15 years, I coached, I don't even know how many athletes, and I coached them in road and mountain bike racing. So on the road side, it would be everything from shorties like 45-minute criteriums, all the way through to several day stage races. And then on the dirt side, on the mountain biking side, again, it would be really, really short, like cyclocross races of maybe 50 minutes long where it's full tilt nausea, all the way through to, well, the longest race I've ever done is a 48-hour solo.
Holy
so
shit.
the athletes that I coach predominantly were on the mountain bike side and predominantly ultra endurance focused. That's kind of what my reputation was out on the scene.
Okay, here's the big question. Did you ever return to the Gatineaus and show those bastards the truth?
Well, funnily enough, here's a really funny story. It's apropos that you asked that question. So I guess it would have been at the end of March and the start of April. I flew out to Ottawa just for 3 days, and it was the 30th anniversary of JTF2. And so I went out there we were on the Friday, it was a dog and pony show. So it was handshakes and seeing all the new tactics equipment and all of that good stuff, all of the secret sauce stuff. And then on Saturday, it was the formal anniversary ball, which was in downtown Ottawa in a big fancy ballroom. And the who's who was there. And of course, the guys that I hadn't seen in like 20 plus years, they were all there. And to my point now, as that was my primary reason for going out to Ottawa, but there was a secondary reason. That was one of the guys, my best friend from that riding time, the greasy civvy, Shaun Taylor, who was the first guy who said, "Hey man, you want to go for a ride? It should be fun. We're going out to this place called the Gatineaus. I was like, yeah, I'm in. Bring it, pal. And so we became really, really, really close friends. And he was a good riding partner. He was full of so much comedy and so much joy. He was just a great dude to be around. Anyway, I haven't seen him in over 20 years. So when I flew back to Ottawa this spring, he was one of the first guys that I wanted to hang out with. And so we hung out 2 days in a row, went out for a bite to eat in the evening and then a bite to eat at lunchtime. And it was just great to see him. It's like we'd never been apart. And so to your question now, when I showed up and we shook hands, we did have a little bit of a laugh about, bro, are you still just riding in the Gatineaus instead of being a world champion like me?
And mic drop.
Yeah, that was it. But, a great dude. And we were always teasing each other all the time. So it was all in good fun.
That's awesome. When you get into, we've got the physical side, and again, we're going to get to the importance of exercise on recovery. But heading back to Satch, you had also mentioned, the psychology of it, that part of that elite training is not just physiologically based. It also has to be psychologically based, just to be able, again, to put yourself into a position where you become so comfortable with being uncomfortable that you're seeking discomfort. That's a different level. So, talking about the psychological side, and training and helping athletes, how is it you work on those things with them?
That's a great question. And so, right to the point, I'll say this. There was a time in my life when I was much younger that I thought the critical elements or the path to success was physiological. But that is not the case, in my opinion, anymore. And that's been the case now for quite some time, for many, many years. I feel that the secret to success is mindset. It's all psychology. It is all what's between the ears. I can take anyone on the planet and turn them into a half-decent athlete. But it's actually boring to do that. I don't have much interest in that. My fascination is mindset. It's what's driven me for a long, long, long time. Every athlete that I've worked with knows my way, and they know that, they usually just call it Jedi mind trickery. You can call it what you want, but what I like to do is work with someone's mind, their mindset, their psychology, and also their emotional state as well, of course. The physiological stuff is super duper easy now at my level of experience, my level of, we'll call it wisdom on training, particularly for ultra endurance. But mindset, that's what fascinates me the most. When I'm first introduced to someone, even like yourself, whether you're an athlete or not is a non-factor to me. The moment that I lock eyes with someone, right away, I'm trying to understand their mind. I'm not trying to understand their biceps,
100%. I'm with you 100%. And again, that's operating at a different level. So what is it that got you into operating at the mindset and psychological level? I mean, obviously it was a progression from the physiological side to where you're now locking eyes, like you said, and trying to determine what makes this person tick, what's behind the eyes, what's going on. Yeah. Was there a particular incident, event, interest that got you into that?
Yeah, and it was a slow-moving process that I wasn't observing intentionally. It was a process of many years, and it just started in my military career. And it was probably once I started doing hard things and observing the men around me and why they weren't able to do hard things, or why they would quit, or why they would just sit down and not get back up again, or whatever. So I got to, I have done some things that are really hard, and those really hard things help separate the wheat from the chaff. But I was never interested in looking at a guy falling off to the side and we never see him again. That didn't interest me. That happens all the time. What interested me at that time was why? Why did he fall out? Why did he not stand back up? Why is he not in the game? And so that's where the bulk of my intellect went, is to try to understand humans in high performance environments, we'll call it, where they are not meeting their own abilities. They're not meeting their own potential. They're not meeting what they could do because of their mind. Their mind was holding them back. They had either quit on themselves or they had made up all the lies, the excuses, the whatever. And so then I started to maybe look a little bit closer about the why of things. What is a guy's why? What is that man's why? Does he even know his why? And then if he doesn't know his why, how can he know his how? How can he even proceed forward if he doesn't even know his why?
Wow.
So if he doesn't know his why and he doesn't know his how can he apply any velocity or any conviction or any wherewithal against the problem if he doesn't know why and how? So
It's deep. That's deep, yeah.
What I did realize over years of observing like good friends, men that I thought were like so much better at a whole bunch of things than me, they weren't passing the tests because of their mind. And I felt it was like such a loss, especially when I started seeing my friends slip off to the sides, when I thought they were capable enough to make it, but their mind hadn't been trained properly to make it. So that was my fascination for a long, long time. Once I became an army sniper and then a special operations sniper, I was spending a lot of time behind a sniper scope, behind optics. And so I studied people, man. Like I didn't get behind the glass. I didn't get behind the binoculars or the spotting scope or whatever. I do to this day, when I put my eyes on something, I'm analyzing it.
Absolutely.
And so, having looked at a lot of humans over a lot of years, I just started forming patterns. And I call them patterns. I'm sure there's a psychiatrist that would call it, I don't know, ADHD impacted observational symptoms. I don't know. But I formed patterns. And so, years and years and years of doing hard things and observing men failing for reasons that I couldn't understand really became my Rubik's Cube. And so I worked on that a lot, and I think I learned a lot of things through all of the adversities that I faced in my military career, and then coming out to each end every time. But then I carried that over into the athletic world. And what I did, I've said this a couple of times publicly. I'm not sure if the teams would really appreciate it so much, but I think they'll take it very tongue in cheek. When I left JTF2, I had a wealth of knowledge. But then when I went into athletic coaching, basically what I decided to do was just create my own JTF2. But it was JTF2 2.0. Because when I was in JTF2, I knew a whole pile of things. But after I left the teams, I was at the Ontario Police College. I was a computer system engineer. I owned a coffee shop. I did this. I went international security, looked after blah, 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 bodyguarding. And then I became a coach. And so all of the things that I learned and looking at all of the people around the world, from businessmen to janitors or whatever the case is, I learned things that then I could apply into the athletic world that was nowhere at any point about how far someone has to ride. Sometimes I just set ride distances because I knew that was the amount of time that was required for me to be able to work with their mind. And so mindset for me is everything in respect to a human, an athlete, a leader, a public figure, anyone. It's, to me, the mind is the fascination.
So when you get into that mindset, and I love that, I have to say that I'm quite pleased with how this is progressing, because it just seems to just come right into the wheelhouse when it comes to mindset. And then we start applying that to, the services, policing, firefighting, paramedics, military, nursing, corrections. I mean, we can go on and on. I mean, there obviously is a huge issue right now with operational stress injuries. And so I would like your input on where do you see some of the causation of that? I mean, is it due to leadership? Is it due to sanctuary trauma, poor organizational skills taking care of people? Is it due to childhood issues? I mean, I know it could be all those things potentially, but
Yeah.
in your experience, Shaun, I mean, you saw good men fall off to the side. You saw friends starting to fall off to the side. And then you started determining what was causing those things. So I guess I'm curious if you've applied that to the current times where, I mean, 20 years ago, nobody talked about post-traumatic stress. Didn't exist. I mean, you heard of shell shock, you heard of whatever, combat fatigue, you heard of different things, but now that's a different beast altogether. Or is it? Maybe maybe it's not a different beast. It just has a different name. But I really like your input on what you see as the causation of a decline in mental health of people in services that are, well, I mean, I'll use your term, elite, in the sense that are very demanding. Very demanding. Let's leave it at that.
That's a good question. And I'll start with stating that the items that you listed off, like sanctuary trauma and et cetera, I think they're all part of it for sure. And I don't think they're a part of it like, okay, sanctuary trauma, that gets 20%, and then this gets 20%, and that gets 10%. And when we stack it all up, it's 100%. And that's how it works. Because that's not how it works. Because every person that I've ever met or worked with, more correctly, is a completely unique individual. They are so different than the person standing next to them. It's the conversation would go on for decades if I was to talk about how different each person is from my perspective, through my eyes as a coach. And so all of those things that you said, I think are part of the problem. But here's my working theory. I'll throw it at you. I've never really discussed it on the internet before. These are just casual observations that I've made over many years, and it's not even in respect to elite units. I think the observation applies all the way down the food chain, right to the brand spanking new recruit on day one. And
Sounds
so
good.
I think it's I think it's me, and I think it's you, and I think it's all the people that we know who aren't doing their part to turn this boat around. And I've decided to try to do something about it with the Collective podcast, and then, of course, my own goofy little Gypsy Caravan Circus show that I do on IG Live every morning. I just decided to do something about it.
Did you just say gypsy?
Gypsy Caravan Circus show, that's right. I just decided to do something about it. And so that's me saying I'm doing something about it. Yeah, but what about like 10 years ago? What could have been done? This could have been done, but maybe not in podcast form. It would have required me to be sitting in a room with a bunch of dudes who are in the hurt locker and having the conversation done right. Done right. And not everyone can do it right. Not everyone can saunter into a room and lean against a wall and have a conversation, a respectful conversation, two-way respectful conversation, where someone is actually listening, paying attention, looking for solutions. Now, systemically, I think the institutions that are out there are trying to do things that are trying to make changes, trying to positively impact PTSD and et cetera. But I just think they're so institutionalized. It's not personal enough. It's not, dude, I get it. How can I help you? It's not
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
And so PTSD is something that, to your point, you shell shock, and then, 20 years ago, maybe PTSD started showing up as a word. But when I bounced out of the teams, there was no word called PTSD. There was nothing. And it was just a non-word. And when I left, so I left on the morning as wearing all my black garb and as a warrant officer. And then 6 hours later, I was at the Ontario Police College as standing in a whatever pair of jeans and a t-shirt, not on the teams. And so my clearance out, or the process when I went from large and in charge to way less large and in charge, was the square root of zero. I got no processing. I got no nothing. Excuse me, sorry. I got no Veterans Affairs. I didn't even know there was a thing called Veterans Affairs until about 3 years ago.
Wow. Yeah.
Straight up. That's no lie. I did not know something called VAC existed because nobody had ever told me. Nobody had ever given me paperwork. All of the medical stuff and all of that, I just slipped through the cracks because at that time when I was on the teams, we were so top secret, we didn't exist. So the regular military had no interaction with us. And therefore, I had no interaction with the regular military. Therefore, I had no interaction with anyone. Therefore, no paperwork was done in respect to Veterans Affairs Canada. So it would have been like I was having nightmares every night, and my sleep was not great, and I was doing everything I could as a high performing coach and as a relentless pursuer of excellence. I mean, it's one of the central pillars of JTF2 or special operations is the relentless pursuit of excellence. So no one had to remind me of that. That's just like part of my DNA now. So I was just always chasing how to become better, but I knew that I wasn't like 100%. I was doing my job. I was doing great work for my athletes and all of that good stuff, just trying to keep it all together. But I wasn't doing great because my sleep sucked because I was having nightmares every night. So I came down the stairs one day, and my sister-in-law was here. And she said, "Hey, how you doing?" I said, "Good." And she said, "How'd you sleep?" I said, "All right." And she said, "Well, what do you mean, all right?" And I said, it wasn't great, but it was all right. And that was my answer for like a long, long, long time.
Absolutely.
And so she said, well, why didn't you sleep? And I said, I just had a little nightmare. And she said, well, I don't know if she said about what, but she said, well, how often do you have them? And I said, every night. Well, for how long? A couple of decades. Have you ever talked to anyone about that? Like who?
Yeah.
Like talk to myself?
Yeah, right.
And so she said, maybe you should mention it to your family doctor. And I said, nah, I'll think about it. And so, I go to a doctor kind of once a year sort of thing. And my family doctor is super cool. And she said, anything else that, all your panel looks good and blood and this and that. And you feeling good? I said, yeah, of course, feel good. Freaking ready to crack it out of the park. Anything else? And she said, well, anything else on your mind? I said, well, my sister-in-law did say that I should mention that I've been having nightmares from time to time. And then that's where it started.
Dang.
And so as my family doctor not dug deeper and deeper and deeper, I mean, obviously it was a two-way street. She was asking questions, I was giving answers, and over an ebb and flow period, she said, and I'll make a very long story short, hey, you know what? I think you should talk to a psychiatrist, and I think you should talk to Veterans Affairs. And I said, how do I do that?
Yeah.
And so
that's a fair question, though. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And so I stepped into the process with Veterans Affairs and sent in some paperwork, and it was just pre-COVID, I think it was. And I sent some stuff in, expecting to hear a reply back from them. They lost my paperwork for damn near a year.
Wow.
And so I was like, why do people even get involved with Veterans Affairs? Like, my psychiatrist has just told me that I've got PTSD, whatever that means. And now I'm trying to do some paperwork on this. Like, the process of losing my paperwork all this time, as I said to the first caseworker that I got, hey, you all gave me more PTSD. Just trying to sort out this PTSD. And that's the truth.
That is
the truth. I'm not making that up at all.
No, I agree with you.
And she understood that, of course. And so, accidents happen, administrative slip-ups happen. I'm not going to hang anyone over it, but it was a bummer that they lost my paperwork. But as I moved through the process of Veterans Affairs Canada, I came to realize that, what? Like, you get paid for all of your injuries? What? You get what? You get retrained? What? There's education? What? Where did all this stuff come from? What is all this stuff?
Right.
And so the caseworker stated that as part of the process for Veterans Affairs, you've got to go get all of this stuff done. We've got to work through all of your injuries that you've never claimed. And she said, can you just list off your injuries? And I said, do you want me to start from the feet and work to the head, or from the head and work to the feet? We'll be here a while. And so as it turns out, it's an arduous process. I will say that you're always, taking a number, drawing blood. You're going through the CAT scan, the MRI scan, back to the CAT scan, back to the all of this stuff. It's a long, sort of irritating process, I found. But at the end of the day, I had about 20 pages of injuries, all kinds of injuries. That when you see me riding, you'd never know that I got a whole pile of injuries because I don't whine about it. I don't chirp about it and don't moan about it because, and we'll get to that maybe here shortly.
Absolutely.
I just try to keep things straight up positive. You know what I mean? Trying to guide with a positive fashion. So anyway, back to the PTSD. When I went through the psychiatrist process, she said, "Okay, we've got your results." And I said, "Okay, good. What's the results?" And she said, "Well, I just wanted to tell you that ... several things. And then, oh, and you have PTSD. I was like, what? He said, "You've got PTSD." And I kind of blinked my eyes for about 3 seconds. I said, "Okay, good." And she said, "What do you mean good?" Because she'd never heard anyone say that before.
No.
So she told me. And I said, "Good," because now I know what it's called.
That's
now
deep.
now
Yeah.
I know what it's called. Now I can crush it.
Yep.
Now I've got something that I'm going to counter assault. I'm going to go kick it in the teeth. And she'd never had anyone approach it that way with default aggressive.
Yep.
And so that's what I've done ever since. I have ferociously actually, researched and talked to and listened to and all the things to learn more about PTSD and then incorporate as many practices as I can in order to not just manage the symptoms, but to like literally kick it right in the teeth. And it's been a fascinating process. And I say fascinating, I chose the word carefully because the moment that she said to me, "You've got PTSD," I could have rolled over and like started sucking my thumb and in the fetal position, and I could still be there.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, this is my character. Maybe it's what I was taught. Maybe it's in my bones. I don't know. But the moment that someone throws down a gauntlet called PTSD, I'm like, I'm picking that thing up. I'm putting it on my right hand and I'm smashing something with it because I'll always pick up a gauntlet and I'll always smash with it. And so the moment that she said it, I was like, I'm going to own that. And then my next thought was, and then I'm going to help people. So that process of trying to figure out PTSD a little bit better, and then figuring out, back to my earlier point of, I just like helping people, and I like to help people because that's what was taught to me on the teams, and that's all of my careers at the Ontario Police College. I was a teacher in my computer system engineering class for the years that I taught. I was the teacher. When I left that and went overseas, the teams that I was running in private security, I was the teacher. When I became a coach, I was the teacher. And so I just thought, man, I'm learning all these things. I might as well do some good with it. I should probably figure out how to start talking about it. And then all my nerd friends, all my loser friends, all my jerk friends, all my goof friends who don't like me at all said that I should start podcasting. And you know, I tried to duck, dodge, and dive that as long as I could because I'm really uncomfortable in front of a microphone. It may not seem that way, but with the kind of imposter syndrome, as I mentioned earlier, I don't want to do this. But the only reason I'm doing it is for the team, and it was the team that berated me so much, like just totally hassled me to do this, that eventually I relented. And then once I started doing it as is my way, it was a relentless pursuit of excellence. This is not what I want to do, but I will freaking crush it because that's just how I'm wired. So if I could jump out of here with a ninja smoke bomb and disappear and just chillax and never do another potty, that'd be all right with me. But I know I can't do that anymore just because too many people have said, you just got to keep on doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I concur with you 100%. First of all, listen, man, the ninja smoke bomb. Damn, did we ever have fun with saltpeter in the 80s?
I love my ninja smoke bombs. I used to make them.
They were, oh yeah, absolutely. They were the best. They were cool. Yeah, listen, I'm with you. I'm beside you all the way on that, Shaun. That is exactly what's led me into it, as well as my own diagnosis, working through it, trying to get to a level of comfort. And then it just finally hit a point where it was like, fuck this. That's it. I'm done. I'm good with this. And it's time to start peeling back the stigmatization, because that's what seems to get a lot of people, is they're concerned what others think. Now, saying that,
Whereas I'm not.
well, and that's what's neat. However, I find it quite perplexing that an individual of such accomplishment has imposter syndrome. And so the reason I'm going to ask you to speak about that a little, Shaun, is because I think that's going to really resonate with a lot of listeners who are also struggling with it, and yet would look at someone like you and what you've accomplished and go, how the fuck does he have that? I mean,
Yeah, I know.
he's like uber cool. He's done everything. What the hell?
Yeah.
But it's there, and I love the fact it's there, and I respect the fact that's there, and it says something about your humility as well, which is fantastic. It's great. You still are a person. You still are a human, despite whatever you've done, and you maintain that, and you see that, and you don't lose grasp on that. So yeah, if you could just speak to your imposter syndrome and how you've managed to I guess progress even though it's there.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I love having these kind of conversations, so I'm happy to talk about it. So, first things first, I do have to say this. I'm literally not a big deal. I know a ton of guys who are way more large and in charge than I am. I've done some things, but it's not that notable. And so the imposter syndrome, you just saw it in full flare. I just delivered some imposter syndrome
Absolutely,
about
right there.
15 seconds ago.
Right there. Absolutely. If you didn't catch it, rewind and listen
Just
again.
in case you're not picking up what I'm throwing down, that was mega imposter syndrome. So I didn't know there was a word called imposter syndrome until I started hanging out with Seb Lavoie. And Seb said to me, hey, man, you know what? Like, you don't like being in the spotlight, or you don't like being patted on the back, or you don't like hearing good things said about you. Yeah, I don't. It makes me uncomfortable. I don't like it. Just tell me what I did wrong. I don't care about what I did right. Let's just freaking move on. Like, why are we wasting time talking about how well I did something? Tell me what I need to fix.
Or to improve it, right? To get better at it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. That's all I'm interested in. Straight up, that's all I care about. Any words that tell me how well I did, any pats on the head that I get, save your energy. Just don't pat me on the head. Just tell me what I need to fix. That's the way I've always been. And funnily enough, we had a guest on the Collective podcast recently. His first name is Steve, and we were talking about imposter syndrome to some degree. And we are in agreement, as I am with many other people, that the imposter syndrome tends to be more prevalent in, we'll call them, for lack of a better term, high flyers, kind of not industry leaders per se, but certainly in tier one, it's a thing.
Right. Wow.
In any high performance racing, like I coached athletes that have imposter syndrome for sure. But I didn't know any of this until Seb Lavoie said to me, hey man, you've got some imposter syndrome. I was like, what's imposter syndrome? Didn't even know it was a word.
Yep.
But then, as I said to Steve on the podcast, bro, I didn't know imposter syndrome was a word, but apparently I had imposter syndrome. And here's the thing. All my life, I've been finding a way to shape it as a scalpel, to use it like a tool so I can go crush. Imposter syndrome is either something that holds you back, or it's something that pushes you forward. And I think I've already mentioned that my coaching company was called Forward Momentum Coaching. That's how I feel about forward momentum. And so it was my job to figure out my self-identity and work with my own imposter syndrome nonsense to shape that into a thing that drives me forward. And it does. I've learned how to do it, and I've been doing it for quite a long time, well before I knew there's a word called imposter syndrome.
I likewise learned it from a guest on the show, Mike Terry, who was RCR. And he mentioned that he went to Shiloh after doing RCR for years, and he went there as a photographer. And he just thought, forget this. That's what he ended up leaving the military for. Then all of a sudden he's going out and talking about PTSD. This is a guy who actually got diagnosed in the early 2000s, if I remember, by CAF. and remained for another at least a decade or more, including deployments, that's not an easy thing to do.
Wow.
No, but yet this man says he had imposter syndrome, and I'm perplexed by this. I'm like, what is that? And as soon as he gets talking about it, of course, I'm like, Jesus, I've got that to add that to the list of ailments. I've got that as well. Damn. But I do concur
just
with
hang on a sec. So
yeah.
This is an important point in the potty, I think, so that's a mindset that I'd challenge you to change.
Yep.
So it's a case of, just one more thing that I got to add to the list of all the things that are dragging me down.
Yeah.
This sucks, man.
Right. Absolutely.
Whereas I just flip it on its head. PTSD, awesome, good. Oh, imposter syndrome, freaking bring it.
Yep.
Now I'm stacking those things in a way that I'm going to go kick some ass, not it's
Absolutely.
dragging me down. And so it's that mindset shift. And it's a simple word game in our brain that determines our path forward in life,
Listen, I concur absolutely. And that becomes a reality as your mindset is everything. I mean, the fact that you mentioned a second ago that you don't whine about your injuries, you go out and you do it. And I am quite the same way, because I wonder, telling everyone that my back hurts doesn't make my back feel any better. Speaking and that my knee is hurting while I'm doing something changes nothing. The only thing it ever actually does is typically provide me with a feedback that I despise, that's in the dictionary between shit and syphilis. I hate sympathy with a passion. I do not want anyone's sympathy whatsoever.
Yeah, that's why I don't whine.
That's the thing. And that's so 100%. That's I'm with you all the way. And so likewise, that's when you take the PTSD. And I think that was a big mindset change for me, is when I actually looked at it as a good thing that happened to me, because ultimately I joined the RCMP to help people. That's what I wanted. I mean, when you bring it down to its lowest common denominator,
that's right,
cheesy as it says, I wanted to help people. I wanted to do something
for
my community.
Yeah.
I wanted to serve. And the downside is for a long time, I feel that I didn't realize it, but I feel that I've lost that. And now I'm back to where I'm actually feeling like I'm helping again in a positive way. And so I don't look at the injury as, again, for lack of a better term, an ailment or a hindrance. I guess I try to look at it, and that's again where I've changed my mindset to trying to look at the silver lining and everything, is it's not the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And it's actually, as I commonly say, as a result of scars that I've earned through service and sacrifice. And that's not a bad thing. I'm okay with those. I'm proud of my scars. And that becomes the mindset. The imposter syndrome was something I had to get over, because, Shaun, I think my first issue when I got diagnosed was, well, how does this happen to me? I mean, there's so many people that have had it so much worse than me. And my mind immediately goes to military. And it's like, what? Like, what? No. What the fuck? And I feel all weak, and I feel all like, what the hell? Jesus. But it's, again, when you take the time to think, there you go. I like time to think and not to whine. And you actually learn about it, as you have done. You actually read about it. You want to tackle it. You want to hit it head on, as opposed to sit down and do nothing and just almost accept it as a death sentence. Then all of a sudden you realize that people are people. You can't compare everything. As you mentioned a little while ago, you could speak for a decade on differences between people. And that all of a sudden is when you start to come around to the other side and say, hey, okay, all right, what do we do to move on? What do we do, as Daniel Sundell says, for post-traumatic growth? And I love that concept. I'm going to use this to actually grow. I'm not going to use this as an impediment. It's going to be something that's going to cause me to grow. And I agree with you in everything you said with regards to mindset. So saying that, this is the longest time it's ever taken to ask a question, Shaun. So I apologize for my
it's
narrative.
a great build-up.
What is it that you would give to people as some key takeaways to change that mindset? I mean, that's huge. What do people need to do?
That's a great question. And the first thing that came to mind is, when someone says to you, Larry, you've got PTSD, I want the word to change from "you've got" to, hey, we just identified that you've got some PTSD issues. Not "you've got it."
Yeah.
But it's not like a lifelong sentence of rabies.
No.
It's just I look at it now as an important filter in history. So it's a filter put in place.
Ah, okay, yeah.
So it's actually a good thing that people are told that you're exhibiting the symptoms of PTSD, because there's a framework in place that's been given a label called PTSD that some medical professional can now step into the conversation and say, hey man, I just want to let you know that you're exhibiting this, and I thought you should be aware of it. And then the answer should be, hey, cool, thanks for letting me know. I'm going to get right to work on that.
It's true.
Rather than someone like handing you a death sentence called the Black Plague. Somehow PTSD feels like it's the Black Plague out there right now, when it
Yeah.
truly isn't.
No.
I mean, it's just, if a medical professional tells you you are exhibiting PTSD, you should just say, hey, thanks for letting me know. You've saved me a whole pile of trouble a few years from now when it would have been worse. Thanks for getting in front of this with me. So that would be my first point of on this subject, is be thankful when someone tells you that you're exhibiting these symptoms early in the journey, rather than sticking your head in the sand and not wanting to deal with this. I've got lots of buddies, veterans, who have been advised that they exhibit PTSD and then have done nothing about it except moan and complain and victimize themselves. That victim mentality, I feel, is similar to when Veterans Affairs lost my paperwork on PTSD. Like, you gave me
Yeah.
PTSD trying to do this PTSD thing.
Yeah.
And so that's the case with anyone who gets informed that they're exhibiting symptoms of PTSD. If they do nothing about it, you're giving yourself PTSD thinking about PTSD. Stop dwelling on the subject as if it's the Black Plague. Start moving forward in respect to getting better. And so, how to get better? Well, here's some things that I've found to be useful. Obviously, I'm going to start to your point with the athletic capability and etc. So, before you throw your leg over a bike, before you go out for a walk in nature, before you climb a rope, or before you throw a frisbee, any activity that you want, before you do anything, you should consider how to improve your sleep. As far as I'm concerned, the biggest culprit in respect to certainly North America, but we'll call it mental health in general, is getting quality sleep. There's a number of ways that you can do that. I'm just going to rip them off real quick off the top of my head. First things first, try to stay off your phone 2-3 hours before you go to bed. Try not to eat within 3 hours of going to bed. Don't eat a big heavy meal that's going to sit in your gut and impact your blood pressure or your pulse while you're trying to sleep. Go into a room that's really cold or as cool as you can make it. If you can put up blackout curtains, great. For myself, I always wear eye shades or block my eyes, and I always put in earplugs. I like it quiet and I like it dark. And so sleep hygiene is the term that is used out there to figure out ways to improve your sleep. And there's probably 15 things that you can do for sleep hygiene. So look it up on Google. That would be the first thing to consider. Next, hydration. Very few people drink enough water. And by the way, when you're drinking your water, try to get some electrolytes in that water. It's really beneficial for you. Food or nutrition. Keep your nutrition clean. Don't overeat. Don't undereat. If you're looking to jump onto the latest fad diet, don't. Just eat healthily, clean as can be. Get away from the boxes, get away from the cans, try to make things from scratch, try to buy locally. If you're eating out a lot, try to eat at local mom and pop restaurants where you know they use quality oils or they use butter instead of margarine, all of these things. Try to dial your nutrition in so that you're eating enough, clean, nutrient-dense food each day. So that's food, hydration, and sleep. Those things are critical. Next thing, now you're thinking about going outside. Don't just grab your shoes and walk out randomly out into the wild, wild west. Sit down and think for a minute about what you might want to engage in. And I'm going to use myself as the example. So when I threw my leg over a bike, I didn't know that I was going to pursue mountain bike racing for, like I've been riding over 20 years now. And so I have to be careful with the hobbies or the sports or the directions that I choose to go in. The moment that I said, okay, you fools, I'll do some podcasting. The moment that I said that is the moment that I knew I'd be doing podcasting for probably another 8 to 10 years, because that's just the way I am. And so don't step into any activities that are going to be good for your body and your mind so casually that you're not thinking forward 4, 5, 6, 7 years into the future. So the example I'm going to use is martial arts. If you're thinking about trying to get involved in something that is physical and challenging, is going to make you use your mind, is going to challenge your emotions, is going to challenge your physicality, and by the way, is going to introduce you to some new friends and going to teach you how to move and going to make you more confident and comfortable on the street, within yourself, in your own home. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a great thing for that. And so I'm going to state, when you're looking for something to do, think about a martial art like BJJ, but don't think about it so lightly that you think, I'll just go give that a try. Whatever, let's just see what happens. What I'm saying is, think to the future on why you're stepping in on that first night to try BJJ. What you're should be predicting as a lifelong trajectory, not just what am I doing tonight? I think I'll go try BJJ. So think to the future when you're choosing the activities that you are considering maybe dabbling in. And if you're 30 years old or if you're 50 years old, those decisions look different based on life trajectory. So just give a little bit of thought to the activities that you want to get into. Now, talked about hydration, sleep, nutrition, and choosing a good activity. So once you've chosen your activity, then what? Maybe you'll be able to figure it all out by yourself, but I'm suggesting that you shouldn't. You should try to engage in either a coach that's going to help you get to the point where you want to be, or engage in a group that is going to help support you as you move forward in the trajectory that you've self-chosen. So as the example being bike riding, if you don't want me to coach you, and I don't coach anymore, so don't hit me up. If you want me to coach you, that's one thing. But if you want to be coached by a group, that's an entirely different thing. And that's for you to determine how you best work in that process. You, at some point, if you want to be all that you can be, you'll need coaching or you'll need group support. So think about the activity that you're trying to self-choose and consider, if you want to be an equestrian, if you want to jump horses, well, you've got to consider what the coaching would look like. You've got to consider what the group would look like. You've got to consider all aspects of the sport on day one as to how it will look 8 years from now. Once you've chosen your sport, once you're into either a group or coach, then you have to start setting like a goal for yourself, a challenge for yourself, some milestones for yourself. Now, let's pretend for a moment that we're not talking about elite athletes, or we're not talking about casual athletes. We're talking about a first timer, someone who's been on the couch. Now, let's do this. Someone who's been struggling with PTSD for about 5 years. Now they're on the couch. They're so bummed out. They're so unhappy. They don't know what to do. They're not listening to good podcasts like this or The Collective to get some wisdom. So what are they going to do? Well, they can put on their shoes and walk out and stand in the sun and see how that feels for a little bit. Do you feel better? Good. All right, now we're off to the races. That first step, putting your sun into the face, that's the game changer. Now you're in action oriented. As a first timer on your couch, 5 years PTSD, don't want to go outside, whatever the case is, thoughts will not change anything. Action will change everything. And so you have to align or synchronize those thoughts to an action. You can't think, I want to go outside today. You have to think, I'm going outside today. And I'm going to go outside at, all right, I'm going to go outside at 1400 hours, come hell or high water, even if it's raining. So, thoughts and action. You have to start getting action oriented. First day might be scary. Maybe you're just walking around your block. Maybe you don't know how to walk properly anymore. Maybe you're just all slumped over and bummed out and staring at your feet. Okay, good, good. Remember it. Remember that first day. Because if you keep your nose to the grindstone, within a matter of weeks, you'll be able to look back on that first day and realize that, who was that dude slumping down the sidewalk staring at his feet? Wow, that was me. Now I've got my shoulders back, I've got my head up, I'm looking at the sun, and I think I'm actually starting to hear birds chirp. Several weeks later, now you're hearing birds chirp. Several weeks later, now you're recognizing people on the sidewalk and giving them a nod because they keep giving you a nod, and you just feel responsible to give a nod back. Several weeks later, now you're walking in town nodding at people. Several weeks later, then you're on a podcast. You know what I'm saying? That's how life works. If you're not paying attention to the several weeks, which you don't really need to per se, all you need to focus on is just forward momentum, action.
I concur. The other side of it, Shaun, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, is I know when I was going through mine, and I speak personally because, well, that's my experience, was, feeling depressed, feeling anxious, wanting to be isolated, dissociating. I was always looking for that thing that would make me a little bit happy today. And a lot of times those easy to get things were alcohol or food. And I would make myself a little bit happier. And then I would make myself a little bit happier. And then you go on for about 18 months of doing that. And then you realize that you've actually created an entire another beast inside you, because now you're struggling with self-esteem too.
That's right.
And you just feel total shit. It has made you significantly worse trying to take those little easy streets out for that little bit of happiness. And it wasn't until I actually started focusing back on myself. So step back from work, got away from the stress level, get back into exercising, try some new things like yoga, like meditation. All of a sudden I'm using different parts of my body. When I start doing that, well, I know I need to eat better. And it goes forward to all of a sudden you're down a few pounds, your body feels better, and that translates to your mind. And as much as you're still dealing with the injury that you have, that's fine, but you are in a completely different mindset, because no longer are you trying to beat the piss out of self-esteem as well. You actually feel better. Then when you're getting tired because you're exercising, holy shit balls, now I'm sleeping better too. It becomes such a huge, a cog, I guess, in a big wheel, but it's a necessary cog that really has to happen. Otherwise, I feel you're going to be constantly treading uphill in thick mud, trying to get yourself in a place that you are the one that's actually torpedoing yourself out of. It needs to be there. Exercise really, it needs to be there, and you need to pull away from the other things that you think are giving you those little peace of minds. You agree?
I do agree. And I will say this, that I find in our modern society right now, the thing that's challenging men the most is their confidence, their sense of worth, their sense of who they are, their self-esteem. They don't feel worthy of even being within themselves, never mind worthy of being in a room full of men who just seem to, have it together, we'll call it. It's that self-esteem. It's that self-consciousness of, I don't deserve ... And you know what? There's a reason for that, because you probably don't deserve, because you haven't deserved anything ever since you gave up on yourself. I'm not talking about you specifically. I'm talking
I know.
about
I get you.
people who are in these moments.
Right.
Myself included, by the way. The only reason I can talk about these kind of things is not because I read it in a dusty history book. It's because I lived it myself.
Right.
And so the idea being that the moment that corrosive nature of self-confidence starts slipping away, then to replace self-confidence, it usually turns into yelling, an angry man, a man who lashes out. And so,
That sounds familiar to me,
any of
Shaun.
my friends, yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
But it happens to every man that I've seen get into this position where their friends aren't simply gathering around them and saying, "Hey, man, like just dial it back," or "Hey, man, you know what? Here's what's happening. I'm going to get right with you. We're gonna do a straight up, hardcore, real talk, and this is what's happening." And it depends on the friend, and it depends on the state of mind of the person that you're interacting with. But ultimately, I feel that most of modern problems for men today are their lack of self confidence. If I step into a room, I'm so confident because of my resume, because of my accomplishments, because of all the work that I've done on my own mind. Maybe I'll be observed as overconfident in a room full of underconfident men. I don't know, but I'm confident based on my life. But there was a time when I wasn't, and I think there's a time for every man when they're not. But the way to come out of that lack of confidence is to engage in something that gives you confidence. And more often than not, for men who've served in the military, Leo, or first responder, particularly Leo and military, when they want to feel confidence, they want to feel more like a warrior. If they don't feel like a warrior, that's when that's the worst kind of man.
Yeah.
It's the man who is not a man. It's a boy who's yelling. And it sets a poor example for all the other men out there, and it normalizes the warrior who is trying to be a warrior but is the opposite of a warrior. So every man, when they start feeling that lack of self-confidence, they want to align themselves again with their identity of who they were as a warrior. And I found that for most men, it's martial arts. It really gets them right back on the track of they start feeling like a warrior again, or at least they're in the mix. So for some men, it's shooting, but I don't find shooting gives the same sense of self-confidence as martial arts does, because not too many Canadian men saunter down the sidewalk with a 9mm on the pistol in their t-shirt, jeans, and Birkenstocks. But as Canadian men, what we do have, if we've got martial arts inside of us, we've got all the 9mm on our hips because we're armed up with our capabilities of defending ourselves. If you can't fight your way out of a wet paper bag as a grown-ass man, chances are you're lashing out at something because you're scared. As you walk down the sidewalk, you're scared. You're scared of your own shadow, scared because you're not tooled up to be able to manage the situation. So for the dudes out there that are struggling with PTSD or any mental health issues that make you feel less than, find a way to become more than, and martial arts will help you.
I like that. Yeah. And one of the things I say, there's a few things in there, Shaun, I want to hit on. One of them is I feel that low self-esteem comes right back circle in terms of the imposter syndrome, because you are continually putting yourself feeling shitty. The other side with regards to the imposter syndrome that I try to tell people is a big moment for me was when I actually stopped giving a fuck about what people thought. And
I disagree with this. We're at this point, I'm going to
go
hardcore push back on you, but I'll let you continue.
I'm interested because my thing is that my care about actually being thought poorly is about being judged. And ultimately, I believe those thoughts and those issues of, again, torpedoing yourself comes as a result of the fact that we think shit things about other people. And so we presume other people must think shit things about us. And it becomes almost it just becomes like this constant black cloud that's just hovering there, because all you're freaking worried about is, well, what's Shaun Taylor thinking of me right now? Well, I don't know. I mean, does he think I'm kind of a puss? Does he think I'm like kind of cool? Like, what does he think?
I'm the poster child for this sort of stuff. I am. I totally get it.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what I say when I say stop really caring about what people think and base yourself upon who you are and who you aren't, because that's the other thing is we focus so much on be yourself, but be okay with the things you're not as well. Like no matter how hard I try at 50 years old, I am not going to play in the NHL. That is it. It doesn't
Unless
matter.
you want to.
Well,
I don't limit myself that way,
yeah,
to be honest.
I guess I'm a realist. I mean,
I get it. The realism of the matter is that to some degree you're logically correct. And I'm not going to push back on that. But what I will push back on is the self-limiting idea of, oh, well, I can't do that anymore because I'm not 12 anymore, or I'm not 37 anymore, or whatever.
Right.
Any limitations, I refuse to accept them.
Yeah, that's good.
In the podcast yesterday, I challenged Jason Sivkovic as to why he doesn't think like the Dalai Lama. You know, like why? Why don't you? Why don't I? Why can't I play in an NA? Well, I don't play hockey, and I actually don't like hockey, so
there you go.
Obviously I'm not going to pursue that.
Yep.
But I'm 60 this year, and I mean the things that I've done when I was 50 are bonkers. And so 50, you know, some people say it's just a number, and I'm not really that stoked about, oh, it's just a number thing, because hey, there's some cold hard facts.
Realities.
50 was fun, 60's less fun, 70 I'm sure will be even less fun. But the fact remains that I don't limit myself that way. I'm practical and I'm realistic, but I don't like to mentally limit myself on anything, particularly when someone says to me, dude, you could never play in the NHL. I'll tell you what, this afternoon I'm driving to get skates.
Yeah. No,
I've never owned skates, but I'll get some skates this afternoon. You know what I mean?
100%. I am 100% with you there. And the other side as well, Shaun, is like you said, I mean, I'm all in or none in on anything. So if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. Otherwise, why are you wasting your time doing it? And I guess the only thing is, like, again, I don't know. There's certain things that I accept as realities. However, I really dislike when someone says that I can't do something. You kind of fucking hit a nerve there, right? It kills me, man. I'm like, whoa, hold on.
If they don't know me, what they just set themselves up for is a disaster.
Disappointment.
I'm coming at them hard.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. Listen, man, I'm keeping an eye on the time, and I can't believe how fast this time is after going.
I'm good.
One thing I want to hit.
I do want to touch on this because I did push back on because you don't care what people think.
Go. Yeah.
So I used to feel the same way myself. And so it's not like I'm academically pulling out some paragraph from a dusty psychiatry book or whatever. I mean, dude, I was you. You're me. I'm just saying. I get it. But what I did find was the ability for me to be a positive change in the world was limited by me being angry and saying, I don't care what you think about me.
Okay, yeah.
And I used to do it. So it's not, again, like an unobserved phenomenon. I observed myself and how non-successful that approach was. So how I try to do it now, and maybe I don't do it well, but I just really try to focus on being positive. And I don't mean like some sort of goofy namaste with patchouli in the background. I'm just talking about like I just try to keep it real, but I try to keep it positive. Yep. Like I can shred someone in a negative way. That's easy. That's actually my default mode from back in the day. I treat it now as I try to gamify it. I try to challenge myself with just like trying to put good into the world. And you'll see me do that over on the 2 podcasts in the morning. I just try to keep it pretty upbeat, and I try to have a few laughs. And I'm not a comedian, and my natural inclination is not to laugh all day long. It's just not me. But when I'm hanging out and I'm trying to be positive and people are being positive back, I enjoy it. It's not my default, but I enjoy it. And so it's here's why I push back so hard. What I now do and what I now realize is this. It's important for people to see me do it out on the internet. And you'd started off things with the one and only and kind of making it a big deal and all of that good stuff. But if I have any juice out there on the internet, if I have any power, if I have any wherewithal to influence things to some minor degree, then I'm going to use it for good. And I understand the difference between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader. When I left the teams, I did say one thing. I'll never cross over into the dark side. And I never have. And that's really important to me. And that's important to me not only in careers or in friends or in whatevers, it's important in my mind.
Yeah.
And so my mind requires me to focus on the positivity and feel like I'm making a positive difference in the world.
There you go. Good. Yeah, that's awesome. I accept that. I do. I accept that. I mean, it makes perfect sense, and I get the positivity. Maybe my maturity hasn't hit there yet. I don't know. It could be.
Well, you've got another 10 years,
I
and
got-
you'll probably
right,
be more
that's
mature than I am.
exactly what I was just thinking. I got 10 more years to grow up. Shaun, you need to ensure that you let everyone know about the collective. Please tell us what it is and what you guys do. Give us the background on the collective.
Yeah, sure. I'll do it real quick. So the collective is something that kind of came together last year. Just a couple of buddies were shooting ideas back and forth. And again, I'll say it, and it might sound like they're empty words, but I like changing things. I like changing the world around me. And I've done it all my life, sometimes small ways, sometimes medium-sized ways, but that's what I like to do, change the world around me. And now I'm just trying to do it in a really positive way. I've latched on to the idea that there's a lot of particularly men out there struggling. So I've focused on that's why I quit my 15 years of high performance race coaching, gave up my company to come and do this for free, to talk to other dudes and other ladies about these subjects. More so, the Men's Mental Health Month this June has been really good for the collective, which started on January 1st. We've done a podcast every single day. I think we're up around 160 podcasts now since Jan 1.
Wow.
And of course, that puts me at about 300 and I guess over 320 podcasts now this year.
Wow.
And the podcast, of course, with the panel guests that we get, it's broad ranging, everything from special operations soldiers from the US, Canada, the UK, New Zealand, all of that good stuff, right through to human behavioral scientists and large and in charge coaches on the men and women's side, and so on and so forth. So some really talented guests. And the free-flowing format over there, usually there's a topic. So again, June is Men's Mental Health Month. So every day this month, we've had some really challenging conversations, some heavy topics that I feel like we've done a really good job. Some of the bigger subjects have been suicide and suicidal ideation, loss, self-esteem and worth, imposter syndrome, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Just a whole pile of things that we talk about for an hour each day. And it started off small, but it's starting to build steam now. I don't follow any of the statistics because I don't care about any of that stuff. It's not my fascination. I just want to crack it out of the park each day. And so as we are right now, I think we're coming up on about 45,000 downloads, and things seem to be gathering steam. So I'm pleased.
Absolutely, man. That's awesome. Congratulations. That is awesome. So everyone can check out the collective. How can they listen to the collective, Shaun?
There's a couple of ways that you can do it, but predominantly it's located over on YouTube. It's a live chat session, so you can join in on the live chat on the YouTube channel. You can send in questions and comments, which we get a boatload of them throughout each episode, and we do our best to answer specifics on those things. So the live chat, you can join us, but the moment that the live chat ends, the recorded episode gets pushed directly up to YouTube, and it is reposited there within the collective channel. And so there's a whole pile of subjects. Each day is a different subject. Think of a subject right now. Give me a subject.
Jesus, Shaun, throwing me out there.
Any subject.
Well, okay. How about the stigmatization of post-traumatic stress and whether or not it should be changed to injury versus disorder?
And I think we've talked about that. In fact, I believe Seb Lavoie touched on that one on a PTSD episode. So the material is out there on the collective. It's for everyone to hunt it down and gather the information that best fits into their lives. And it's a work in progress. I've been told, hilariously, by many people now, too many to count. And this is the part that it drives my imposter syndrome is so on red alert the moment that I start thinking these words, but I'm just going to say it out loud because that's what I'm supposed to do. In order to own imposter syndrome, you've just got to own it. And so I've been told that eventually the Collective podcast will be kind of a really small version, probably underwhelming in my mind, but a really small version of the Canadian form of a Joe Rogan show to some degree. And I think it's laughable. In fact, I literally laugh every time someone says it.
I like it, though.
But a lot of people have said it, and we'll just see where it goes. If nothing else, personally, I don't care what it gets turned into. All I do care is that we're laying down some groundwork for people to check in on a bunch of unique conversations that, in my opinion, no one else out on the internet is covering them the way that we are doing. And that's not from viewers that are telling us that. That's not ourselves telling us that. That's the guests that we have come on, like, Pat McNamara, when he says those kind of things, I'm like, oh, he's been on a boatload of podcasts and he'd know as a Delta guy what this whole thing is all about. And so when you start hearing it from, again, the one and onlys, then maybe there is something to it,
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. That's fantastic. And look, ultimately as well, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, that it's not about, I always say, it's not about fucking trying to become internet famous. It's about just trying to help people, help the brothers and sisters that are struggling, try to impact that suicide epidemic, try to save at least one. So if this stuff hits somebody and for whatever reason it helps them, go to bed tonight and get up tomorrow morning, that's a good thing. That is a very good thing.
I agree.
Shaun, before we end off, this is anything else that you would like to add? This is the time. The floor is completely yours.
Well, thank you. So I will add this. Given that my thoughts that are bubbling through my head require another 12 to 87 hours of conversation, I don't think I can add any further subjects or topics to the conversation. But I will say this. Thanks for having me on. And though I feel, as I often say over on the Collective, I feel we only just scratched the surface on some of these subjects. We could go a whole pile deeper on some of the things that we've talked about, or we could have talked about a bunch of other things for sure. So I'll leave it at this. If you're ever desperate for another guest, if one drops out and you need to fill in the gap, I'd be happy to come on over and fill in that gap on a part 2 anytime you want.
I appreciate that, brother. And it's not about someone dropping out. It'd be an absolute pleasure to talk to you because I enjoy the conversation. I enjoy the back and forth. I enjoy the challenging. I really do. And I enjoy, just the side that you have there, your vision, your experience. And it's great. It's great to chat about, and it's great to be able to converse back and forth through those experiences. And to me, it really does help, senses of imposter syndrome or senses of self-esteem. I mean, it's certainly, it's great being with like-minded people. I'll say that, who have been through the shit.
I dig it.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, Shaun, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much again. Shaun Taylor, you can catch him on Instagram. Your Instagram username, Shaun?
Yeah, it's Shaun, Shaun Taylor, Shaun Taylor's 1 with the number 1. Shaun Taylor's 1. And I'm only on one spot on social media. It's Instagram and a little bit on the YouTubes, but I'm all about the IG.
And I think your daily live, when it's just you, Shaun, is what, 1,000 hours around there?
Yeah, 1,000 hours PST. Listen, it's around 1,000 hours. Sometimes I'll just be like reading a book and I'm thinking to myself, I know I'm supposed to be on time at 1,000 hours, but it's 10:05 and I just need to finish this chapter. So
nice. Yeah. The world can wait.
It's an informal timing, I'll say, on the first podcast.
I like that. So you can find Shaun on Instagram. Great to be part of the lives. Shaun will interact with everyone who comments there and has no issue with people coming on to join him, to talk on the live, as well as the Collective. You know what? I do want to cover this before I end off, Shaun. I understand, but there will be a lot of listeners, I believe, that don't understand why it's called the Collective. Could you please explain that?
Yeah, sure. It was a bit of a brainstorming moment first when we were trying to name the podcast. But at the end of the day, I think that anything that I've ever been involved with is really just a collection of like minded people, the collective, a collection of like minded people, just as you stated just a couple of minutes ago. My buddy Seb Lavoie has often said that he likes to engage with people who are like minded. I've just heard it so many times from the people who are intimately involved in the podcast. And obviously, in my own little peanut, as I was trying to plot out world domination on social media, I just thought that the collective made sense. So it was a title that came up amongst a handful of us and just felt right.
Perfect. Love it. So for those who have stuck around, I really appreciate that you've listened to the Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast. There are several takeaways from this episode, so much that I encourage you to go back and give it another listen. Some things that you need to remember is that sleep, nutrition, hydration, having the proper mindset, finding something to do and just doing it are very, very important to your benefit, to your ability to deal with whatever is going on in your mind. It will put you in a better mindset to do so. It will allow you to look at things from a different angle, because I feel a lot of times we get stuck in that ditch of everything just going through one set of eyes, one set of thoughts, and we don't get out of our own way. You need to get out of your own way. Remember as well, you are part of a bigger group, a bigger team. Although you may feel alone, you are not alone. You are a part of a collective. There is a group of like-minded people who are experiencing the same things you are. And a great thing to think about is that Shaun has been diagnosed, and take a look at where his mindset is and where it has got him and where he continues to go. He sees everything as a progression, not anything less. If he is failing to progress, he is failing. And that is his mindset. That is not anyone telling him that. Think about it. My name is Larry Payton. I have your 6. Please have mine.
Don't go away. There's so much left to do, so many things I wanna say, and I say, don't make the change. If it rains every single day, I'll fight to blow it all away.